Today we're going to talk about a terrifying case, the case of the hellish couple of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. Crimes caused by religious fanaticism are not uncommon in this world, and hundreds of thousands of people fall prey to this extremism every year. And most of these people don't share those views. The case of Lori and Chad was a sensation a few years ago, but until now it has been a mystery for a long time. Such cases have been reported in the media around the world and have provoked great public shock and confusion. In this series of events, 5 family members, including 2 children, were killed. And the couple, who have been dubbed the hellish couple by the media, are now on trial by the law. Nevertheless, not only are they denying their crimes altogether, but they are trying to get away with it. I hope to receive the lightest possible punishment. But we'll have to start at the beginning and see how people who have gone on to find God have lost their humanity. Chad Daybell. How did he get to this road of no return, step by step? On August 11, 1968, Chad Daybell was born in the small town of Provo, Utah, in a modest area, and he was an introverted and shy child. In school, Chad was an ordinary student, with no outstanding talent or athletic achievements. After graduating from high school, Chad attended Brigham Junior University, where he received a degree in New Literature in 1992. During college, he met Kamala, a simple and ordinary girl. Soon they got married, and soon they had 5 children. After graduating from college, Chad worked as an editor at a local newspaper for the sake of his family. He also worked as a janitor at the church. Even graves were dug in the cemetery. Because his wife, Tamara, takes care of the children wholeheartedly. The family's finances are all supported by Chad. One day Chad decided to write a book on religious subjects. In 1999, his first book was published, which resembled a collection of religious tales or fantasy novels, and it was an unexpected hit that brought him a lot of money. So he quit his newspaper and church jobs and devoted himself to writing. About a year and a half later, he published The Edge of Tombology. This book, which deals with his thoughts as a gravedigger, including the question of death, the afterlife, and the reincarnation of the soul, was well received by readers. In 2004, Chad founded Spring Crypt Books to publish his own books on topics such as Armageddon and Judgment Day. As time went on, there were rumors that Chad's beliefs were becoming more and more extreme. He published many books and began to give lectures. He called himself a writer of the apocalypse, who claimed to be able to foresee the future, to hear the voice of the king, to make personal predictions. Lori Vallow's story is just as colorful. He was born on June 26, 1973 in Loma Linda, California, and grew up in a large family. He has a good relationship with his brother Alex. The older brother was always there when he needed help. Growing up, Lori grew into a blonde beauty with a charming smile, a love of being the center of attention, and full of energy. In 1992, he married his high school sweetheart, but soon divorced. In 1995, he remarried, and soon had a son, Colby, but it didn't take long for the marriage to end. In 2001, Lori married Joseph Ryan Colby, who lived with them, and they had a daughter, Teddy. The marriage eventually ended in divorce in 2005, when Lori's ex-husband, Joseph Leifa, was attacked by his god, Alex. Alex said in court that he was protecting his sister because Joseph threatened him, and as a result, he was sentenced to imprisonment and fined. Lori's marriage to her third husband, Charles Vallow, began in February 2006. Charles is 17 years older than Lori, but the age gap is not an issue. Charles was also married to 2 children. They originally settled in Nevada, and the children of Lori came to see them occasionally. Charles runs a small business and is the breadwinner of the family. In 2014, they adopted Charles's niece, JJ, who is a child with autism. They moved to Kauai, Hawaii, and opened a beach bar, but it didn't work out. As a result, it went out of business. When I was in Hawaii, Lori developed a keen interest in religious literature, especially the work of Chad Daybell. He was almost obsessed with his mind and bought all his books. In 2016 they had to leave Hawaii and return home to settle in Arizona. Lori's religious fanaticism grew deeper and deeper, and he began to distance himself from reality. In October 2018, Lori and her friend Melanie attended an event hosted by Chad to prepare for Christ's second coming. Shortly after the event, they began their daily communication. Lori invites Chad to his house to hold a meeting to discuss religious topics and decides to cooperate in preparing for the end times. Charles didn't realize the change in his wife until it was too late. Lowry begins talking about the dark elves and the zombies claiming to have been chosen for a divine mission. Charles's attempt to bring him back to his senses failed, and Lowry even began to see him as an enemy. By the end of 2018, Lowry and Charles Vallow's marriage was crumbling. One day in February 2019, Charles returned from a business trip to find that all the locks in his home had been changed, his truck was missing, and about $35,000 was missing from his bank account. He was shouting his wife's name outside the door and trying to get in, but Ari rushed out like a madman and cursed Charles, shouting and saying, "I don't recognize you. What did you do to my husband? You are the devil." Charles had no choice but to go to the police station to report that Lowry had stolen his money and prevented him from seeing his family and children, and he was afraid that he would be harmed, and the police department gave him a protective force. In his statement to the police station, Charles mentioned Lowry's enthusiasm for religion, his belief in the end of the world, and his penchant for dividing people into good and bad. Although the officer laughed at him a little, he still gave him protection. The next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Murray to his mother and sister. His lawyer said Charles was worried about JJ's safety, knowing that his family would make good use of the money to take care of the child if something happened to him. As for Terry, because Charles didn't raise him, he couldn't be put on paper. A few months later, Charles made a big mistake by rescinding the protective order and trying to reconcile with Lowry to save the marriage. He started going to his ex-wife's house in the hope of being reconciled. But the accident happened again. On July 11, 2019, Charles was shot and killed while visiting the children, and was shot twice in the chest. Lowry's brother, Alex Cox, called the police, saying that he fired the gun, and claimed that he was defending himself, saying that Charles had hit him with a baseball bat, and he shot him. This was seen by other people and children, and their testimony was basically the same thing, and the court ruled that it was justifiable. Interestingly, while Charles is a former baseball player who can get a serious injury with a baseball bat, Alex's head injury isn't serious. On the day Charles died, Lowry had a party at home with music and a dance floor by the pool where her husband had died, and the blood hadn't dried yet. She didn't give Charles's funeral or tell anyone else. Charles's children, mom, sister, and other relatives didn't know he had died until a week later. His body was still in the morgue and unclaimed. Next, Lowry sold their house in Arizona and moved with their children to Vicksburg, Idaho, close to Chad and his wife, Tower Men. Lowry's older brother, Alex, also moved in with him, and Lowry enrolled his son in a special school for children in the West Side, but his 16-year-old daughter, Tyre, was rarely seen outside, and the neighbors didn't know there was such a child. Meanwhile, Lowry even told a friend on the phone that his daughter was the devil. September 8, 2019, Lowry took the kids and his brother to Yellowstone to play, and Chad went too. No one has seen a fetus since the other day. September 24th of the same year. Rarity drops her son out of school and says he will be homeschooled in the future. The 7-year-old boy hasn't been seen since. Less than a month later. On October 19th, Chad's wife, Tamar, died suddenly. Chad said that he had a cold and cough, probably died of respiratory failure while asleep, that there was no sign of violence on his body, and that the cause of death was determined to be natural death. Chad was adamantly opposed to the night corpse. This strange decision did not arouse suspicion. 2 weeks after Tamar's death, Chad got about $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks later, Chad and Lowry went to Hawaii to get married. When they got back to Arizona, Chad and Lowry lived together, and they said that the children were at relatives' homes or that they didn't have children at all. And they rented a warehouse in the area and moved all the children's stuff as if they never existed. On December 12, 2019, Alex died at home, and the cause of death seemed to be a heart attack, but without an autopsy, it was determined that he died of natural causes. Over time, people are more and more concerned about the whereabouts of Lowry's children, and they lie to his neighbors and acquaintances, but dealing with relatives is more complicated. His eldest son, Colby, has rarely contacted him since he moved away, and he has always wanted to contact his sister. At first, Lowry replied on a woman's cell phone, pretending to be Tile, but Colby soon felt that something was wrong. Charles's relatives also wanted to see JJ. I wanted to take him out or at least make a phone call, but Lowry always refused to make excuses. Eventually, the boy's grandmother called the police to say that he was missing, and Colby called the police soon after to find his sister. The police got a report and knocked on Lowry's door and asked him to bring the kids to talk. But he lied and said that the children were at a relative's house. After the lie was subsequently exposed, the police gave him a week to go to the police station. But he and his new husband fled to Hawaii again. On February 20, 2020, Lowry was arrested in Hawaii and brought back to Arizona. The police searched his and Chad's home, but they couldn't find the children, and there was no evidence that the children were there. And then people started to suspect that Chad, who had been defending Worry and insisting that he didn't have children. Until June 9, 2023, the police dug up the remains of a person in the backyard of their house, which was the missing Tyre Nkije. Chad was subsequently arrested and charged with conspiracy. Then the police decided to dig up the bodies of Daybell and Alex to see what their real causes of death were. In both cases, chemicals were found that can cause the heart to arrest, which means they may not have died of natural causes. The trial began in January 2021. Chad and Lowry faced charges of conspiracy to commit fraud and insurance fraud. Charles's death is also believed to have been premeditated. There are witnesses in the court who say that Ari took the children for the devil, said to save their souls. There is speculation that there may have been a breach of account in the deaths of Tyre and JJ, whose bodies had been partially burned in the weeks before. Chad previously emailed Lowry to rate Tyre dark level 2. In the face of so many accusations, they can be sentenced to death. But in May 2021, Ruoroe's defense team claimed that he had mental problems and was unfit to stand trial, and the trial was finally put on hold. At the same time, Chad's children are convinced that he is innocent and that he was framed by Lowry and Alex. In 2022, Lowry was deemed fit to stand trial after receiving treatment. In July 2023, Lowry and Chad were sentenced to life in prison without false signo. This case taught us a brutal lesson. It gives us a glimpse of the dark side of human nature. Religion is supposed to be a force for people to seek comfort and guidance, but when faith is distorted into extremism, it becomes a double-edged sword. We must always be vigilant and not be deceived by extremist thinking. Also pay attention to the people around you, especially those who are exhibiting abnormal behavior. Only through hard work can we jointly safeguard the peace and tranquility of society. Falling leaves and flying flowers, listen to the story of the Iran and realize the way of humanity. We'll see you next time.